The road to Oboyan was one of the most important directions on the southern face of Kursk because it seemed to offer the Germans something they desperately needed: a way to turn penetration into operational freedom. After breaking into the Soviet defensive belts from the Belgorod area, German armored formations pressed northward, trying to force open the routes that led deeper into the Kursk salient. Oboyan lay ahead as a practical and symbolic objective, not because its name alone decided the campaign, but because the road toward it represented the possibility of movement beyond the prepared defenses. If the Germans could reach open operational space, they might still threaten the rear of Soviet forces and give Operation Citadel meaning. The suspense lay in whether that road was truly a path to victory, or whether it was becoming a funnel into a prepared Soviet response.
If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore.
The German drive toward Oboyan belonged mainly to the southern pincer of Operation Citadel, where Hermann Hoff's 4th Panzer Army pushed north under the wider direction of Field Marshal Erich von Manstein. This was the sector where the German offensive made its deepest and most dangerous gains. The attack included powerful armored formations, experienced crews, infantry, engineers, artillery, and air support, all trying to create the kind of combined arms momentum that had made German operations so effective earlier in the war. But the situation in 1943 was different. The Germans were not surprising an enemy still learning how armored warfare worked. They were moving into a defense that had been designed with their methods in mind, and every step toward Oboyan had to pass through that design. For a listener without a map, the movement can be pictured simply. The Germans were advancing northward from the lower edge of the salient, trying to climb into the Soviet defensive system and then push toward the roads leading to Kursk. Oboyan sat on one of the important routes in that direction. The terrain was not an empty plain where tanks could simply race ahead. It included ridges, streams, villages, fields, roads, and defended points that shaped movement. A road could help an attacker move supplies, guns, infantry, and fuel forward, but it could also become predictable. If the Soviets understood where the Germans had to go, they could mine approaches, prepare artillery fire, position anti-tank guns, and turn the road from an artery into a trap. The German hope was that the southern spearhead could force its way through the Soviet belts quickly enough to unbalance the entire defense. Once armored formations are free behind a front, their value multiplies. They can threaten headquarters, artillery, supply dumps, reserve routes, and communications, forcing the defender to react everywhere at once. That was the old promise of armored operational warfare: break through, keep moving, and make the enemy's command system collapse faster than it can understand events. The road to Oboyan seemed to offer that possibility, but Kursk was testing whether that promise still worked when the defender had built depth precisely to prevent a first success from becoming a final success. The Soviets defending this sector, under Nikolai Vatutin's Voronezh front, did not try to make the battlefield perfectly rigid. They understood that German armor could break into forward positions and that some ground would be lost. Their purpose was to keep the German advance from widening, accelerating, and escaping control. Defensive belts, minefields, anti-tank zones, artillery concentrations, and local reserves all worked to keep the spearhead under pressure. The Germans could take a village, but then face another belt beyond it. They could clear a minefield, but then be shelled in the lanes they had opened. They could push armor forward, but if infantry and engineers fell behind, those tanks risked isolation. Oboyan became important because the Soviets had to prevent the Germans from turning a road into a rupture. The fighting on the approach showed how movement itself could become exhausting. German tanks and assault guns might lead an advance, but they could not maintain momentum unless the whole force moved with them. Engineers had to open lanes through mines and obstacles. Infantry had to clear trenches, villages, and hidden gun positions. Artillery had to suppress Soviet fire at the right moment. Fuel and ammunition had to travel forward over roads already crowded by vehicles, wounded men, repair teams, and traffic control. A panzer division was not a collection of tanks, it was a moving organism. At Kursk, the Soviet defense attacked that organism by forcing its parts to slow down, separate, and repeatedly reconnect under fire. The road to Oboyan also made the problem of flanks increasingly important. An armored spearhead advancing through a defensive system does not only look forward, it must worry about what remains on either side, because bypassed strongpoints, Soviet reserves, and artillery can threaten the shoulders of the advance. If the spearhead narrows too much, it becomes a corridor rather than a breakthrough. If the corridor is mined, shelled, or counterattacked, supplies and reinforcements struggle to reach the front. The German advance in the south was dangerous because it was real, but it was also vulnerable because it had to remain connected to everything behind it. A road that looks like a route to decision can become a leash if the enemy controls the ground around it. Soviet commanders faced their own danger in deciding how much strength to commit to the Oboyan direction. If they committed reserves too late, German armor might force open the road and create a crisis deeper in the salient. If they committed too early, they could waste precious formations in local counterattacks before the main German thrust was fully revealed. This was one of the hardest kinds of command decision in armored warfare, because the signs are never clear in the moment. Reports arrive late, dust obscures movement, radios fail, and units under pressure may overstate either disaster or success. Vatutin and the higher Soviet command had to read the German advance not only by ground lost, but by whether that advance still had the momentum to become operationally decisive. The German advance toward Oboyan began to show the difference between tactical achievement and campaign success. German units could fight well, destroy Soviet positions, and move forward against determined resistance. Those achievements mattered to the men on the ground and inflicted serious damage on the Red Army. Yet Citadel required more than damage. It required a quick decision before Soviet reserves and counteroffensives changed the wider situation. The road north did not open cleanly. Instead, the Germans were drawn into repeated battles that consumed time and strength. The more the road became a contested channel, the less it looked like the beginning of a sweeping encirclement, and the more it looked like another way for the Soviet defense to manage German power.
The Soviet response also reflected a growing maturity in combined arms defense. Anti-tank guns did not have to stop every tank by themselves. Mines did not have to destroy entire formations. Artillery did not have to annihilate the spearheads. Infantry did not have to hold every village forever. Each element contributed to delay, damage, and uncertainty, and those effects accumulated. When tanks slowed, guns could fire more effectively. When engineers were pinned, mines remained dangerous. When German infantry lagged, Soviet defenders could hold or counterattack. When supply routes clogged, momentum faded. The Red Army was turning the road to Oboyan into a system of interlocking problems, and in mechanized warfare, enough problems in sequence can defeat even a powerful thrust.
Air power added pressure to the struggle, though it did not make the road to Oboyan either a German or Soviet certainty. Aircraft could strike columns, support attacks, attack artillery positions, and search for reserves moving behind the front. The Luftwaffe remained dangerous, and German close air support could help armored formations through difficult moments. Soviet air power had grown stronger and could challenge German operations more effectively than in the early years of the war. But aircraft, like tanks, worked best as part of a wider system. They could influence a fight over a road or village, but they could not erase minefields, guarantee supply, or remove the need for infantry and engineers to secure ground. The battle below still depended on coordination under fire. The road to Oboyan ultimately matters because it shows the southern German offensive at the edge of possibility. The Germans had not been stopped at the start. They had made progress, forced Soviet reactions, and created the most serious danger of Operation Citadel. But they had not achieved the freedom their plan required. The road that might have led toward decision was becoming narrowed by Soviet resistance, flanks, artillery, reserves, and the cost of keeping armored formations moving. In the story of Kursk, this is the moment when the southern attack still has force but begins to lose clarity. It is pressing forward, but forward is no longer the same as decisive. The Germans are still advancing, yet the battlefield is increasingly deciding what that advance can mean. In the larger history of armored warfare, Oboyan teaches that roads are never just lines of movement. They are promises and dangers at the same time. A road can carry tanks, ammunition, fuel, artillery, and command forward, but it can also reveal intention and concentrate vulnerability. Earlier armored victories had often depended on turning routes into sudden access to the enemy's rear. At Kursk, the Soviets showed that a prepared defender could study those routes and turn them into funnels, fire zones, and tests of endurance. The road to Oboyan was not a failure because the Germans lacked courage or tactical skill. It became a failure because the Soviet defense kept tactical penetration from becoming operational freedom. That was the heart of Kursk. Not simply stopping tanks, but stopping what tanks were supposed to make possible.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.